And last but not least,
we travel to our final Minneapolis Arts District destination for the year.
And this district is packed, full, loaded, brimming.
Humming, bustling, and buzzing with arts activities.
Stay with us for a special Artifacts tour of the Loring Arts District.
Coming up on Artifacts.
Well, I'm Phill Lindsay from the Minneapolis Community Development Agency.
And I'm Zahn with the Office of Film, Video, and Recording for the City of Minneapolis.
And this is the October edition of Artifacts.
You know, we've had a great time looking into the Loring Arts District, and I've found out that Mr. Lindsay here has a wealth of knowledge about this area. He's got lots of good stories, and some of them you are going to hear in our video tour coming up.
And after the tour, you'll meet my first guest, Miriam Must of the Red Eye Collaboration. She'll tell us about what's new and exciting at that theater this fall.
And Phil's next guest, David Martin, who is the director of the Loring Park proper, will tell us about Loring Park programs and plans for renovation of the park.
Then Joni Herren, who's the project coordinator for the Stevens Square neighborhood, will also be with us to fill us in on some of their new initiatives and cultural activities.
And finally, Bruce Jenkins, who is the senior film and video curator for the Walker Art Center, will join us to talk about some very exciting visitors and film events coming to the Walker this fall.
So if you want the scoop on Spike Lee and Tom Hanks,
and a whole lot more, stay tuned for Artifacts.
First up, a tour of the amazing Loring Arts District. Roll 'em. More people go to arts-related events in the Loring Park area than any other neighborhood between Chicago and the West Coast.
We're here in the Loring Greenway, and within 3 blocks of where we are, there are 3 major arts institutions: the Walker Art Center, the Guthrie Theater, and Orchestra Hall.
Across the street from the park is the largest urban sculpture park in the United States, with its signature piece Spoon Bridge and Cherry by Klaus Oldenburg and Kosha von Bruggen. Nearby, there are many smaller and mid-sized cultural organizations and venues, such as Red Eye Collaboration, the Loring Playhouse, Ballet of the Dolls, and the Women's Club.
This is a great place to do a play. It's convenient. It's right on the south edge of Loring Park. There's free parking right next to the building, and in one of their parking lots right across the street, just up the street a little bit. It's a beautiful old building. The theater, our tickets are not expensive. They range from basically from $12 to $10 to $14. We have lots of student discounts and senior discounts. We have lots of seats, so you don't even really need a reservation. We kind of pride ourselves on making theater easy to go to. You don't have to make a reservation. You don't have to dress up. It's not hard to get here. It's not hard to park. It's not terribly expensive. It's a great night out without spending a tremendous amount of time or money. It's an easy place to go. It's an easy night out, and a fun one too.
The old Loring Theater, which was established in 1920, is now known as the Music Box Theater. At one time, the old Loring was also home to the Cricket Theater, and it was used as a church too, whose leaders were none other than Jim and Tammy Faye Baker.
There are many more conventional churches located in the Loring Arts District. Each one is of significant architectural interest, and they all support cultural activities.
In 1907, ground was broken for the Basilica of St. Mary, which was the first basilica ever built in the United States. The church is noted for its stained glass windows and the recently dedicated Mary Garden.
The Cathedral Church of St. Mark and Hennepin Avenue Methodist Church were both designed by the same Minneapolis firm, Brown and Hewitt. Inside Hennepin Avenue Methodist, you'll find a religious art collection donated by T.B. Walker in 1917. Plymouth Congregational Church boasts the largest embroidered wall hanging in the world by artist Pauline Baines. It took 50 local workers 3 years to stitch.
Wesley United Methodist Church, next to the Convention Center, claims 2 well-known former members, J. Paul Getty and the famous trotting racehorse Dan Patch. Central Lutheran Church, which also has a religious art collection, supports several choirs, had a chamber orchestra at one time, and broadcast its compline service over radio station WCAL every Sunday night. Finally, there's the imposing Westminster Presbyterian Church with its beautiful rose window overlooking Nicollet Avenue.
One way you can get a fascinating look at several of the Loring Arts District churches is to join the Walk on the Avenue, an architectural tour that takes place on a Sunday afternoon in August every year. The Basilica, St. Mark's, Temple Israel, and the First Unitarian Society open their doors to more than 3,000 people for this tour each year.
The Loring Park area is alive with arts education programs as well. The major arts organizations support educational efforts, and Blake's School, the McPhail Center for the Arts, and Minneapolis Community College all have strong arts training and production curricula. An interesting side note, the site of the new theater on the community college campus was originally part of the Northwestern Bible and Missionary Training School, where Billy Graham gave some of his earliest sermons.
Loring Park itself is a major cultural asset of the city. Founded in 1883, the park is host to numerous festivals, fairs, and events throughout the year, including movies and music in the park, programmed by the Walker Arts Center. Movies at dusk also were shown in nearby Stevens Square this year.
You'll also find many fine pieces of public art in the Loring Park area. The venerable Ole Bull, the Norwegian musician and teacher, was memorialized by artist Jacob Fjelde in 1897. The Burger Fountain, based on an Australian work and known to some as the Dandelion or Showerhead, was installed in 1974.
Tucked away in the park building is Aldo Moroni's six-piece Loring Suite, a work commissioned in the mid-1980s that tells a story of the park area's past, present, and future. The 1930 statue of Father Hennepin blesses the approach to the Basilica from the Mississippi River. It was created by artist Fred Slifers.
Sia Armajani's Irene Hickson Whitney Bridge, linking Loring Park with Lowry Hill, Kenwood, and Bryn Mawr, was installed in 1988.
Other nearby artwork includes the light-hearted Monopoly game figures by Lucy White and others at Nicollet and 15th, Douglas O. Freeman's Aurora outside Marquette Place, some interesting medallions on the old Architects and Engineers building at 2nd Avenue and 12th Street, Paul Granlund's Birth of Freedom at Westminster Church, and the Peavy Fountain at Orchestra Hall.
It's also worth getting over to Marquette and 10th Street to see some of Jill Rivard's design of Scarbo, which includes the third section of Maurice Ravel's piano work Gaspard de la Nuit, painted on the Schmidt Music Company's building. It was just redone last month. By the way, it is said for copyright purposes, one note is purposefully incorrect.
And don't forget that the Nicollet Mall has a program of public art, including Tacumba Aiken and Setu Jones's River and Shadow Pavement Art, with written material by Soyini Guyton near the Hyatt Hotel.
Finally, you should know that this neighborhood has quite an interesting past. Upper Nicollet, from about 12th Street to where I-94 now cuts around downtown, was a popular entertainment district from the 1930s through the 60s. Frank Sinatra, Martha Raye, Sarah Vaughan, and other big-time stars played at the Flame Bar, which originally opened in 1938 as Club Carnival.
Later, the Flame went country and hosted stars like Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, and Buck Owens. But in 1980, the Flame flickered out, and its marquee forlornly promoted hard and soft rock and old and new blues.
Some of you may also remember the Marigold Ballroom, long a fixture on the 1300 block of Nicollet. This club rocked for generations, but finally met its demise in the 60s when construction of I-94 closed Nicollet to traffic for a couple of years. I-94 construction also called for the demolition of many buildings and much housing, and unfortunately the area deteriorated rapidly. But in the 1970s, residents in the city began an effort to reclaim the area. The Loring Development District aimed at creating an in-town urban village, and by 1990 there were about 6,600 people living right around Loring Park.
Over the years, many arts groups in the area also have participated in the planning process for the neighborhood's revitalization efforts. Most recently, Citizens for a Loring Park Community, the official organization that serves the neighborhood proper, decided to hire an arts coordinator. Leslie Ball, familiar to regular Artifacts viewers, now has that job.
The Loring Park area enjoys a healthy hospitality industry, including the convention center, which draws 1.5 million people every year. There are also lots of restaurants, hotels, and other providers of goods and services.
And so this whole arts district really has become a regional, even national destination for arts lovers everywhere.
Well, that was another look at one of our great cultural districts, formal or informal, here in the Twin Cities, and we're really pleased with that piece. I'm also happy to have as my next guest the managing director of Red Eye. It's a theater in the Loring Park area, Miriam Must. Thanks for being on the show. It's good to have you here.
Thanks.
Did I get that right, managing director?
I am managing director.
Okay.
As well as co-founder and a member of the performing company.
That's right, because I've often seen you on stage. And how old is Red Eye as a theater?
We're entering our 14th season this fall.
Well, that's almost stable. That's pretty
Almost.
good. Congratulations. Well, I remember Red Eye when, now maybe this wasn't even where you started, but in Washington.
That was our first space.
Yeah, and then some years ago you moved over in the Loring Park.
In 1989,
89.
we moved over into Loring Park.
Well, for those who don't know, well, let's start exactly where are you?
Sure. We're at 15 West 14th Street between Nicollet and LaSalle. That's a block and a half due west of the convention center and 2.5 blocks due east of the east side of Loring Park.
Oh, no, you've said that before, I
Yes.
can tell. But that's actually, you're right in the middle there. Those are great
Exactly.
landmarks. I mean, easy to find.
Very easy.
And the mission of Red Eye, I think it's a theater, but I would characterize it as kind of a cutting-edge theater.
Right. We always say that we hold one pole of the aesthetic spectrum in the Twin Cities arts community. Our interest is in works that, as you say, push the envelope. And in recent years, our programming has expanded from a theatrical foundation, which is still at our core, into related disciplines, particularly involving multimedia elements. So film, music, dance, as well as
Can you talk a little bit more? I'm a little more familiar with the media work you do there, and I know that there's music and the dance
Right.
and movement. But
Right.
talk a little bit about these different program elements to Red Eye.
Sure. Well, we have a core company, and several times each season, or it depends on the number of times, depending on the specific year, we mount our own work as a company. And our work is signatured, it's live theater, almost always original works, and it's signatured by the incorporation of media into live performance. In addition, in recent years, we've built a much more stronger commitment to supporting independent artists who are working with new performance forms. And we see that as one of our large thrusts at this point. So we support a lot of independent artists and have supported many, many over the years who are working with new pieces in early stages of development as well as in later stages of development, depending on the project. And those are covered in our annual Works in Progress program, as well as in a program that's been around for about 4 years called the Isolated Acts Festival.
Isolated Acts?
Acts
Okay.
Festival. Also in the past 4 years, we've added a film exhibition program called Red Eye Cinema that has been headed up by two great curators, Matt Bockham and Mike Dust, who just cycled off after 4 years. And we have 3 new curators who will be sharing that program. Rick Hansen, Ethan DeSias, and Isabel Harder. And we're very excited about what they're planning. And then we've had in the past a permanent music curator, and now we do more periodic events.
Kind of project by project?
Project by
on that
project on the music front, which informally is called uneasy listening.
Pushing that envelope.
Pushing that envelope. The most recent event there was actually produced by an outside producer of Dub Narcotics Sound System, a group out of Olympia, Washington, that was an all-ages show, which is one of the great things about coming to events at our space.
Absolutely.
And then we've been presenting lots of dance, particularly local choreographers, as well as bringing in cooperation with other organizations, some national choreographers. This coming season we'll be presenting Concrete Farm, which is this fabulous, great new group that's been getting a lot of attention the past couple of years, a collective of, I think it's 6 women. And then at the end of the season we'll be presenting a dance company out of Florida.
That's great. And I always think that's a great service, too, when a company like yours brings in folks from other parts of the country for we Minneapolitans to take a look at. That's important.
It is important.
really
And
good.
Phil's, we consider ourselves a really vital alternative arts center.
Yeah. I think you support that mission quite well.
Thank
You were nice enough to bring a few images, too, and before we get too far in, I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through some of the images you brought from past productions. I think they're fascinating.
Thanks. This image is from the first production that kind of put Red Eye on the map in 1984. It was a piece called Geography that was written and directed by my partner at Red Eye, Steve Busa. And it was in our old space in the warehouse district in downtown Minneapolis. And this particular image is of an artist who's also part of our core company, who resides most of the time in New York City but comes in occasionally to do projects with us, Leslie Mohn. And she played a woman who was actually became a vampire of sorts, and she's pretty much lost her soul, so to speak, and has taken on the form. She only exists now as a puppet. And we borrowed from Bunraku style puppetry, a Japanese form. So the strings you see attached to her arms were actually manipulated by hooded characters who stood on a platform above her, and it was a magnificent performance.
And as you say, put you sort of on notice here to the community.
That's correct.
Well, that's great. Nice that you archived these images.
Yeah, we try. We've lost some of them in recent years. This piece is one of the first pieces where we really bumped up our level of incorporation of media into the live performance. This was a piece called Everything in Sight, which was produced in cooperation with what was then called UC Video, now is called, of course, Intermedia Arts, and we combined our resources of video, slides, etc. This is a 2-level set. The bottom area was used for slide projection, as you can see, and also for shadow play, so that when slides weren't being projected, there were often live figures behind that screen creating these great shadows. And that was a downstairs apartment of Wanda, the girlfriend. The top level was a detective's apartment, who vampirism tends to be a theme in our early works anyway. A detective is searching for whoever is perpetrating these crimes. All these victims have been found sucked dry of blood throughout downtown Minneapolis, actually. And Stephen Peabody, who was a member of our company at that point in time, that's his apartment on the top level. And you can see he's sitting at a computer console. And this was very early on with just when large video images, the quality were starting to get quite exciting. So we were shifting over from the use of film, which was getting too expensive, into video. And as he typed on his computer console, the computer-generated typing would come up over the image, which you don't see in this particular image, but it was quite exciting for us at the time. And it's a piece we also took to Los Angeles. The Museum of Contemporary Art brought us out with that piece. Here's another image from that same show, and again you see the image down below and the detective up above, the staircase leading up to his apartment.
Nice example of the collaboration in your,
Absolutely.
in your work here.
Which certainly has been a long-standing method for us, and what I think is the wave of the future between organizations. This piece is from a work called Blue Moon that we performed again at our old space on Washington Avenue North, and also toured to New York City and performed at La Mama. It was inspired, or parts of the story were inspired by Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, and so Hester Prynne appeared in the production, and at some point she's hung. And this was, we worked with a magician, really an a Las Vegas magician, who helped us to do this body switch. So this hanging took place 3 feet in front of the audience, and Hester was hung, and one thought she was dead. And literally within 60 seconds, she reappeared dancing the tango.
That's
you
quite
know.
the stagecraft
It
right there.
was. It was quite an exciting event. So, and she and Dimsdale danced off into the future, into the sunset.
I love it.
So that was how that piece concluded. Another work that we did that was a collaborative effort with a number of writers as well as the company, et cetera, and it is a method we've used on several occasions through the years in creating pieces with a company of artists. It was called Flesh Unicorn, where we looked at some source material and then spun off from there. And always we're trying to get work that deals with contemporary issues and images. That, and in fact, the figure in the foreground, and this is me in drag. I played a poet, a disgruntled poet of sorts. But you can see, once again, that the visual elements in our work are incredibly important. And finally, this last image is from another piece where we worked with artists who are mid-career artists who were interested, who are from different disciplines and were interested in creating a multimedia theatrical work. And that was Maria Chang, who's a dancer, choreographer, and teacher, Thomas Rose, a visual artist, David Mura, a writer, and Kim Hines, who actually is a theater artist, writer, and performer. And this is a scene in which, so all of them performed, and
that's a collaboration.
It was quite the
Incredible.
collaboration, and it was, of course, the red eye that they turned once they decided what form they wanted the piece to take. And this was a piece called Silence and Desire.
Well, thanks for that overview. That's fascinating, and a nice look at some of the highlights in your history. We've got seconds left. If people wanted to find out about shows that are coming up, they want to make a reservation, there's a phone number.
870-0309.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.
Pleased to learn more about Red Eye.
My
That's great.
pleasure.
Well, David Martin. David Martin is the director of Loring Park, and he's going to be my next guest, and he'll be with us right after this feature film fact. Oh, and we've got a great poster giveaway. It's a phone-in opportunity coming up, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, you know, we could not have a discussion about the arts in the Loring Park area without talking about the park itself. It's central in more ways than one, and we've got the gentleman here to talk with us about that. David Martin, you are the coordinator of Loring Park.
Right.
Okay. And that's a big responsibility. There's a lot that goes on there. It's got a fascinating history. And I'll just say right off at the top, we don't have enough time to begin to outline Loring Park, but let's give it a shot at least from the real basics. Where is Loring Park for anyone who might not know?
First of all, Loring Park is in downtown Minneapolis at the very southwest border of the downtown. And if you see this map that we have of the park, you'll see that Hennepin Avenue is on the western edge of the park here. And this basically truly is the central park of Minneapolis, if you would compare it to like Central Park in New York City, but of course on a much smaller scale.
Well, and you, before we started taping here, you said something interesting about the fellow who actually designed this park.
Horace Cleveland, interestingly enough, in 1856, called for the establishment of the nation's first city public park, which is Central Park in New York City. He is the designer of this park originally, and this park, established in 1883, is the oldest city park in the city of Minneapolis. And so it does have a rich history.
And a lot of people think of it now as this beautiful gem set within a whole lot of development downtown. But when it was first created 100+ years ago, it was really on the edge of the city. There wasn't a whole lot there.
Exactly. We had some of the most fashionable homes and mansions lining the park. And as the city grew, of course, it had enveloped it. And now you have it next to some of the finest arts institutions in the city, in the country. Walker Arts Center, the Guthrie Theater, Orchestra Hall are all on the border of the Loring Park neighborhood.
That's right. And then a lot of activities in there. And one thought, too, in the location piece we did at the top of this show, you were kind enough to let us get some images of Aldo Moroni's six-piece sculpture, which is his sort of story of this area, this geographic area maybe, from early times through the Native American time that this was their land, and then all the encroachment of the cities and the population. And what we're looking at here, David, this is really a schematic of some future plans, or plans for the future.
Phil, you mentioned a really important part, and that is that this was originally a favorite hunting and a lodging grounds of the Dakota Indian tribe, and as late as the 1860s, an Indian chief would lodge for the summer right here at the
Is that right?
at the southwest corner of the lake. And so this had Indian trails going to Lake Calhoun, where a Sioux tribe was located. But of course, the park developed as the city's first real park. It was a serene, idyllic, beautiful setting, garden-type park. Over the years, it has developed to be more recreational park. As we see, there have been more facilities put into it, a recreation building in 1906 that Charles Loring had put in. And so now it is trying to coexist as this beautiful garden park, but also an extremely busy recreational park.
That's right, and there are a lot of plans here. For people who don't know, I mean, currently, people go down there, there's horseshoes, there's a shuffleboard club. Basketball is just about 24 hours down there.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
We have Minnesota's only shuffleboard club. We have national champions that come out of the horseshoe tournaments that are held down there. We have tennis courts. We have all sorts of recreational wonderful things to do at Loring, and yet people are still wanting it to be a sort of a garden setting to get away from all of the hustle and bustle of the city.
Kind of a respite from the intensity of downtown. Well, you and I met, I'm going to say, close to 10 years ago or so.
Almost.
And maybe if our crew here can swing over and get a shot. I think the first event, and this is a signature event, I think, for Loring Park, is what was called in those days the Loring Performers Festival.
Right.
And it was just one of many. I mean, you and your staff are responsible for numerous events that go on here, many of them cultural, some of them political, social, whatever. Do you want to just sort of randomly outline a few of the different kinds of things that have gone on in Loring Park in the recent past, and even this summer? There's at least a couple of big ones.
Well, Phil, as you remember, we both worked on the Loring Performance Festival, which was a festival really that the citizens group, CLPC, Citizens for a Loring Park Community, which began in the early 70s, developed, and it was a wonderful festival that featured theater, dance, the arts in Loring Park, because we have such a rich cultural setting here. We're around so many of the cultural institutions. And the park is a favorite for major political rallies, for corporate picnics. Obviously, there's day-to-day recreational programming. The children come down, do arts and crafts, sports. And we have major festivals such as the Gay Pride event, which is held there every year.
And not too many weeks ago, those ice cream guys were there.
Yes, now that was exciting. We had rather a historic year, a record-setting summer this year, and it culminated in September with what we believe was the largest single-day festival ever held in the park. Wow. And it was called the One World, One Heart Festival, and the public reaction and the media reaction was just phenomenal, some calling it the best festival they had ever seen in Minneapolis. Interestingly enough, this beautiful plan we have here would actually prohibit having an event of that size and scope ever again in the park.
Interesting.
So there is still some negotiation that needs to be done by the community with the park board to decide if this is exactly what they want or if they need to make some adjustments.
Well, that's a good point to transition. Why don't you broadly and briefly kind of walk us through some of the proposals here?
The main two things that are proposed and will be done is the lake that you see here, or the pond, is going to be completely drained because the water quality is very poor, and they want to drain it, put in a plastic liner bottom, put in certain types of plants and an aerator, and they want to redesign that part and plantings along the lake. They also want to, you'll see this area called the performance area over here. Right now we just have a concrete slab, which is the bandstand, where the movies and music in the park series with Walker are held, and many concerts. And right now they would like to put in a permanent performance area and move, which was the superintendent's building, the oldest building, one of the oldest buildings the city owns, to that site as a backdrop and put in a performance area right here.
That building you're referring to currently is down on 15th
Sitting down here on
Street.
15th Street.
Yeah,
And
charming
it was
building.
the first superintendent's office.
For the whole system.
Yeah.
Not a big space for
No,
that early
no, not at
superintendent.
all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
1880.
so a performance area here with moving in the building. It looks like there are a couple of other major features here.
This garden design is rather extravagant. It's very beautiful, but there are some concerns of it being a pastoral setting so near to the main performance area. They're going to redesign much of the bridge area, have the horseshoe court be a phenomenally beautiful area, and just make it into more of a Garden Eden type setting, which some people want and some people say will be a little too much to handle if they do every part of the design.
So there are a couple points of views about
Yes,
this.
exactly.
Sure. In fact, I noticed too here that it looks like they're doing some treatments on the entrances, the corners of the park.
They want to make the park have more visually stunning and beautiful entrances into the park, from Hennepin over here where the Walker Art Center is, and of course the sculpture bridge comes across from the sculpture garden, which is also, the land is owned by the park board. And so they want to redesign the pathways. You really can't talk about Loring Park without talking about Charles Loring.
Good point.
And he, of course, is called the father of the park system. And he had the foresight to lay out and call for the establishment of parks in the city. And so this, being the first major park, was renamed Loring Park.
Okay, in his honor.
Yes, in his honor, even though it was originally Central Park.
Okay, so that was the original name?
Central Park.
Okay. David, we've got just a couple moments
Yeah.
left here. I wanted to ask you a question. As someone who just knows this park, and indeed many of the parks in Minneapolis, what's a favorite feature of yours? Something that maybe is either hidden or it's a surprise that a lot of folks maybe don't know about and they really shouldn't miss?
You can come down to Loring Park and see some of the most beautiful wild birds, egrets, blue herons, blue and white herons, seagulls, ducks, geese, in phenomenal numbers down there in a city park, which gives you the feeling of being in the outdoors. Also, it attracts some of the most unusual events, like the Blessing of the Animal events, where you see animals of all kinds down there. It's a park where you have probably the most diverse usage of any park in the city. The rich, the poor, the homeless, all living together in the downtown area. And you see just a wonderful kaleidoscope of events and programming.
David, last question. And once upon a time there was a perception of this park as a little problematic. What you're describing, though, sounds a lot more dynamic. What's happened to that perception?
That perception is changing because of efforts like groups like CLPC and Loring Watch Patrol and things like that that are trying to make the community safer and a nicer place to live. And the park did have a negative connotation because of some of the prostitution, the crime and everything back in the 60s, and it persisted. But the reality does not bear out the fact that it is actually quite a safe park by the number of reported crimes. And it's a beautiful park. People should come down and enjoy it.
It's a gem. David, thank you very much for your overview on the park.
Thank you, Phil.
Great place to go and visit.
Enjoyed talking with you.
Now, if our crew here will just hand this to me, in a moment we're going to have Joni Herren on. She's the projects coordinator for Stevens Square Loring Heights. But before that, every once in a while here at Artifacts, we try and do a giveaway. Now, frankly, we haven't been all that successful because not all that many of you call in. But we've got a phone number for you to call in, and as a lure to call in, what we've got right now is this beautiful Twin Cities Marathon poster. This is the real one from this year. And if you are the 12th caller to call the City Cable 34 hotline, that's 673-2234, yes, you will win this absolutely free. We'll send it to you in good shape, okay? So call the City Cable 34 hotline and tell us why you really like Artifacts. I don't care if it's how we're dressed, if it's the great guests like David, or just the set that we've built here, or the knowledge you've learned, the notes you're taking, the diary entries you're making. Call us, and if you're the 12th person to do so, you get this poster mailed to your 9-digit zip code. Heck, we'll even mail it to a 5-digit zip code. So call 673-2234. Get this poster in your wall. Now, we'll be back in just a moment. You stay tuned. So please, call that number if you want that poster. It's a good one. I've got one on my wall. We can even arrange to hand it off to you while you're running around one of the lakes. Well, my next guest is essentially a new friend. This is a woman who works with the Stevens Square Community Organization, Joni Herren. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And you are the project's coordinator.
For the Stevens Square Community Organization, indeed.
And that organization represents not only Stevens Square,
but Loring Heights.
That's right. So it's kind of a conglomerate up there. Where is that? For those who don't know where that double community is.
To the north 94, to the east 35, to the south Franklin, and to the west Lindell. So it's a very narrow neighborhood.
Yes, just geographically speaking.
Yes.
Because it's diverse in almost every other regard.
Good save.
Yeah, that's right. But it is. Because it's right there, cheek by jowl with Nicollet Avenue, Upper Nicollet, I think they call it historically. And in this show that we're talking about, the greater Loring area, we wanted to include your communities that you work with because there's a lot of art and exciting things that are going on there.
I think that's very true. Where would you like to start? What should we talk about?
Well, something that you started, I think, was this the first year or the second year of your movies?
It was actually our third year of movies and music in the park. Our first year we rented films from the library from a collection that they don't offer anymore. The second year of movies and music in the park, we did monsters in the park, kind of playing on the idea of urban fear and trying to have a little fun with that. And we did an entire season of monster movies. And in that collaboration we worked with the Red Eye Theater. Miriam Must and her crew, Matt Backham and Mitch Vars and Mike Dust.
Well, so a good example of how the arts and the neighborhood get together and put a few monsters in the park.
Absolutely.
But now this past year, wasn't it science fiction?
This past year was Fast Forward, films about the future, playing on an election year theme. And we had the League of Women Voters doing voter registration on site, had some local politicians come out and introduce some of the films, and had some fabulous jazz. Next year is going to be City Beat, films looking at urban themes. So we're going to have films like City of Hope, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Crooklyn, The Bicycle Thief, Cooley High, one I'm not going to be able to pronounce properly, and I apologize, Los Olvidados, and West Side Story.
That's a heavy movie. Los Olvidados. Yeah,
Thank you.
Talk about, go see that. That'll be next summer?
Yeah.
Excellent. And somewhat rare. I asked about that movie to a fellow who grew up in Mexico, and he was surprised that any of us Norte Americanos had even heard of it. Excellent movie.
It's actually our most impressive lineup in terms of diversity, and that's something that I think we've really been trying to improve. So we're really excited about this.
Good for you. And speaking of diversity, your community is diverse. Who lives there? Who's there? What's the mix?
There are a number of old historic buildings. Some of them are single-family ownership, but a very small percentage. The neighborhood's about 95% rental. And of renters, you run the gamut from the people who live in the historic district in the brownstones surrounding Stevens Square Park to people living in the two neighborhood high-rises to group home residents.
That's an interesting area right around the park. I've often thought that's one of the sort of the least Minneapolis-looking neighborhoods that we've got. Yeah. And it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's great. In fact, were you involved? I know your organization was involved with that overlook over 94 that looks towards the skyline, I guess is what you're saying.
The Stevens Square Overlook project. In fact, the city is just putting together a slideshow of highway projects around the country and innovative uses of making freeways more attractive. And they had several slides of that. We were real pleased by that. It's on 17th.
Yeah, between Nicollet and
17th, actually between Stevens and 2nd, and then a walkway will expand that will take people from 3rd all the way over to Nicollet, and actually over to LaSalle when it's done.
Excellent. Well, that's a nice project. Well, you've got a lot of projects. You've mentioned that there's a mural project that's being worked on.
We got Compass funding from the state legislature to do a mural project that we did over the summer with inner city kids for the most part, and did it on panels so that could have a tour of duty around the community and then be mounted on the south side of the Urban League Street Academy building on Nicollet. Yeah. So that's been at the Government Center. It's going to be part of the backdrop for the State of the County address. It's going to be, it was at the Ben & Jerry's Festival in Loring Park.
All right.
And before it goes into its permanent location, it's going to be part of a Walker Free First Saturday, which we're really, really proud of. That's a wonderful collaboration. And if I may, can I give the number for that?
Oh, please do.
Contact the Walker to find out more about this Free First Saturday or other Free First Saturday programs. Call 375-7622.
Okay, and that particular event is going to be when?
October 5th.
Okay, so coming up early in this month.
Early October, so some of your viewers may have missed that, but it's a once-a-month opportunity.
And ultimately, they can see that same mural, though, on the south side of that building.
Absolutely.
That's great. You're also working with, I think, in collaboration with other neighborhoods that adjoin yours, the Central City Neighborhoods group.
Central City Neighborhoods Partnership, which was born of the recognition that small neighborhoods, especially I think in the inner city, share a lot more of our issues and our problems and our opportunities in common if we collaborate and work together. And I think that a lot of that was born of coming out of the NRP programs and realizing that, that if in fact we're going to continue some of the programs that were begun under that initiative, we need to work together to secure funding. So that group looks at a number of issues, including restorative justice and arts programming and economic development issues.
And which neighborhoods are involved besides yours?
Elliott Park, Loring Park, our neighborhood, and the Downtown Residents Association.
Okay, so that covers quite a bit of territory there.
Almost the entire central district of downtown.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to talk a little bit about the history. You've talked with me a little bit about some of the historical aspects of Stevens Square and that sort of thing, and how that's leading into some upcoming projects that you're working on.
Actually, I have an intern this summer who's working on a really nice project that will put together a combined history. A lot of work has been done on Stevens Square because it received historic designation in 1989. And there are a number of historic buildings dotting throughout Loring Heights, but no history was really done that looked at them as a common neighborhood. And since they were sort of patched together, we felt that that was a bit remiss. So Liddy Howard, working from NPCR, is putting together a history, and then we'll have that probably available late this fall. There's going to be an exhibit from some of the photos that she's gathered from that, and as well as a text.
So there'll be a publication that comes out of that?
I think there'll be a small publication that'll be available on our website as well. And I can't give you the website address off the top of my head, but if you call the SSCO office, we can certainly give you access for that.
As long as you mentioned that abbreviation, why don't you tell us what that phone number is for SSCO?
871-7307.
Okay, we can pull that up on the screen. They can find out about that and a lot of other things that are going on there.
And a lot of other things. One of the things that was interesting that came out of the history was that especially in Stevens Square, there are a lot of now vacant lower level spaces that used to be occupied by thriving little stores. And we've just recently, through somebody who found us because of our website and now lives in California, been gathering more information about what life was like here in the 60s from the point of view of a resident at that time, who talks a lot about all of those little thriving stores. Most of those are now vacant spaces, storing, you know, refrigerators and, you know, junk and everything for the apartments up above. And we've long felt that if we could bring more artists into the neighborhood, that would help us sew together our social fabric in a neighborhood that's estimated to have some 60 to 70% turnover annually. So for about the last year and a half, I've been working with Councilmember Nyland's office, Councilmember Scott's office, the Zoning, Planning, and Inspections Department to put together a plan that would allow what it's so catchy, you'll just be rattling this off moments after I say it, lower level non-traditional live workspace.
Bless you.
Isn't that great?
Well said.
I didn't believe I'd be able to do
Lower
it.
level non-traditional living workspace.
And what that really means is that property owners can now take advantage of the opportunity to convert those spaces into areas that their tenants can make use of, whether that's a potter making use of a space where they can have a wheel, or whether that's you know, a seamstress doing some work down there, or somebody wanting a little office space, or somebody wanting a soundproofed space that they can use for music practice or whatever.
What a clever idea.
Isn't
That
that
sounds
great?
very cutting edge to me. I have never heard of a project like that.
I think what's really nice about it is that we really believe that if we can get people to stay in the neighborhood because they have access to a space that really offers them multi-purpose and for you know, affordability too, that they'll be more likely to stay in the neighborhood. And we worked with Michelle Bloom, who does consulting on this kind of project, working with home-based businesses, and all of the data that she's gathered as well indicates that the people who have a home-based business or other opportunity like this really take better care of their neighborhood. They become more involved. And
they're
that's what
there.
we want. And they're there,
in the
absolutely.
neighborhood. That's
absolutely.
great. Joni, Herren, a lot more to tell about this. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you for sharing about your community.
Absolutely.
Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, next up, Bruce Jenkins. He's the senior film and video curator for the Walker Arts Center. But first, an innovative director, first-rate screenwriter, and gifted actor who will be visiting the Twin Cities on November 2nd. He tells us a little about his career in this clip from the Independent Film Channel.
After I graduated from NYU, my film, Joe's Best Life Barbershop, won the Student Academy Award. And so I had, a couple little articles about me. And I had an agent from William Morris. And so I thought that now that I had this plaque on my top of my television, and that Columbia and Warner Brothers and Fox, Universal, Spielberg, Lucas, they would call me. So I just sat by the phone some more. Then the phone got turned off.
Well, and Spike Lee will be at the Walker Arts Center very early next month, and I'm very pleased to have as a guest a gentleman who's responsible for bringing him and another exciting guest to the Walker, to our town, and we have Mr. Bruce Jenkins. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Phil.
And you are the senior curator of film and video at the Walker Arts Center.
Close. I'm basically the curator. There are really only three of us in the department. Marlena Gonzalez-Tamrung's been there about 6 years. She's the assistant curator, and Dean Otto has been there a couple of years as the department assistant. So three of us. So
okay.
I could be senior, junior, anyone.
I see what you're saying. And it's a team effort.
It is, absolutely.
You guys do exciting programs over there. Over the years, you have brought in stellar names and names that we're not familiar with, but that we ought to learn about their films.
Yeah, I think even just in the past year, we had the Quaid brothers coming in from London, who are extraordinary animators, and Agnieszka Holland, who's been making films in Poland, but more recently in France and England, made The Secret Garden. She was a special guest. Of course, Gordon Parks was here in the summer,
yes.
So that was somebody we'd long wanted to have in the museum and in the community.
Right. Well, thanks to you, we got to cover Jane Campion's presence.
Yes, it's one of our special.
That was
events.
really good. Well, I want to ask you about a couple of the guys that are coming into town in the next month. This month, you've got Mr. Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks had come into the community when his wife, Rita Wilson, was doing a supporting role in the Schwarzenegger Jingle All the Way. And I got a call one day saying from her that we'd like to see the museum. They're very good friends with Jonathan Demme. Jonathan Demme, who directed Silence of the Lambs, has been to the Walker many times. We've shown a lot of his work. He was actually one of the first people we did a dialogue with back in 1988. He and Pauline Kael did one of the most exciting evenings talking about his work. And he's a longtime friend and supporter. And he had said, Minneapolis, go to the Walker. So when they were there, they got a wonderful tour. Our head curator, Richard Flood. And I afterwards, I said to Hanks, I said, I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't invite you back to talk about your work. And of course, at that moment, he sprung it on me. I didn't know that he just directed his first feature, which is, of course, the same moment we got Jodie Foster, who just finished shooting Little Man Tate. And we're always looking for that kind of juncture point. I mean, there are many people I'd love to bring, but we always want to find an interesting point in the career to bring them.
Yeah.
And writing and directing his first feature seemed like a great moment.
That's an excellent connection, Bruce.
Yeah.
Sounds like a combination of his personal interest and the fact that there was the infrastructure here in the cities that he had respect for.
I think both, exactly.
Yeah. So he's going to be here. You mentioned the dialogue, the Regis Dialogue.
The Regis Dialogue.
What is that all about?
Well, we've had support originally from the MacArthur Foundation in Chicago back in 1990. That was the year we had Clint Eastwood and James Ivory and Jodie Foster. And about 3 years ago, Regis came up and said, if MacArthur ever decides they want to fund something else, and they did, we're going to step up. And so the Regis Foundation for the last 3 years has funded all of our dialogues, and this is our first of the season. And again, it allows us to to think very widely and very ambitious programming.
Right. And you've got, is it Richard Schickel from Time?
Richard Schickel.
He's going to conduct it.
He's going to conduct it. He was here, again, in that kind of prototype day. He did one of the very first. Arthur Penn, who had done Bonnie and Clyde, was here. Richard Schickel did a wonderful job. And then the first MacArthur dialogue, Clint Eastwood and Richard Schickel, again, an extraordinary evening.
Well, a guy like Hanks, gets put up against interviewers and you know, Entertainment Tonight and that kind of thing. What do you think this interview, this dialogue is going to have? How is he going to respond? Or does he have ideas that he's been putting forward that he'd like to talk about?
He's a very spontaneous individual, and I think that there's not a canned response that I think we're going to hear. Richard Schickel is a veteran who's really interested in the film work, not at all starstruck. I think it's an opportunity for him to talk about, you know, a career on camera that's been extraordinarily successful, and then the shift and what it's meant to work in a very different way in film, and then possibly what the future holds.
Tell us, because I want to move on to that other guest you're bringing into town, but for the Tom Hanks, that's happening when?
It happens a week after his film, That Thing You Do, opens nationwide, so he'll be here. That opens October 4th. He's here the October 11th.
Oh boy, so that's very timely.
Yeah.
And then early in November, you've got Mr. Spike Lee coming to town.
Yeah, we have to thank Fredrickson and Byron, the law firm locally, because they work with us very closely. We'd asked Spike Lee innumerable times. Before every big Spike Lee feature, we would say, Spike, please come and do a dialogue, let us do a retrospective, let us honor the work, let us do a preview of the new film. It just never worked out. And Fredrickson and Byron came in and created a structure for him to come and do our dialogue and do a program for them.
Well, it sounds like you have a relationship with Spike.
We do, and again, a lot of partners, a lot of helpers, the film board as well. And Spike will be coming in and talking. He has a new film that opens this month, Man on the Bus. He has been working on a television series. He has a documentary he's making. I mean, he's always busy. He's still in pre-production on the Jackie Robinson story. He's an extraordinarily prolific and busy maker. And he'll be, taking 2 days off to come, and he's going to be doing the dialogue with a former writing partner, Lisa Jones. Her sister Kelly Jones is actually on staff at the Walker, and Lisa's going to be conducting the interview and talking about Spike's work from the early days at NYU.
Yes.
And winning that Student Academy Award all the way to the most ambitious project, I think, the Jackie Robinson story.
So at a certain point, he didn't keep waiting for that phone to ring.
Absolutely
he went out
not.
there and made it happen.
And that's really what he's here to talk about. In a session before, he'll be talking about investing, independent production, and the kind of financial structure.
And the date for Spike Lee?
He's here the 2nd, a Saturday, 2nd of November.
Okay,
So
now
next
there's an
month.
important point, though, that this is actually a good reason to join the Walker.
Yes, we've been besieged for Hanks tickets and besieged as well for people interested in Spike Lee's dialogue, and we've decided we're going to give members a priority, and of course, since there are only about 350 seats, that means virtually all the tickets are going to go to members.
Okay, fair enough. There's also other stuff going on in October, and you were good enough to bring a clip that gives us just the briefest peek at an exhibition. Do you want to just, as we set that up, why don't you tell us what we're looking at and what this installation is?
Yeah. Occasionally we get into the galleries, and we are currently showing a piece that was commissioned by, you're seeing it at the Wexner Center about a year ago in Columbus, Ohio, kind of sister organization to the Walker. And it is a piece, the first for an American museum, by the French New Wave filmmaker Chris Marker. Chris Marker, in 1962, directed a short called The Jetty that inspired Terry Gilliam most recently to write and direct 12 Monkeys. And The Jetty is a classic film. And he's gone on and made many other personal essayist films. This is an installation that was commissioned for the 100th anniversary of film, and we're right at the kind of end of that period of honoring and celebrating film's history. And this is 5 monitors that show images from silent cinema. And it's called, appropriately enough, silent film or silent movie.
That's right. Earlier this year,
Yeah.
you had installations or discussions on the Lumiere brothers and a lot of that history.
Well, we're going to have the whole Lumiere Brothers program. We just, though, last month completed Century of Cinema, which was a British television commission. Went around the world asking major directors, Jean-Luc Godard on French cinema, Stephen Frears on British cinema, Martin Scorsese on American cinema, to look back at 100 years of production and make very personal documentaries. And we showed those in September.
But great learning opportunities with all this.
We hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, we really are trying to engage people both in the belief that there is important culture that happens on film and on video, and to show that there's very exciting new work to be seen.
Before we go, we got a couple minutes left. I want to hop back a step here and talk a little bit about these filmmakers that are the left bank.
Yes.
And I was watching their movies, and I never made the distinction between the left bank and the right bank.
And the right bank.
Yeah.
Well, the right bank is usually the group that's much more prominent. people who were writing for the journal Cahiers du Cinéma, as Francois Truffaut, Jean-Luc Godard, Claude Chabrol. They were more interested in, I won't say conventional narratives, they certainly didn't seem conventional at the time, but they were more interested in the narrative cinema. Much of their writing was on American popular films, Howard Hawks, Alfred Hitchcock, and when they went to make their own first features, typically were gravitated to genre-like films. Breathless is essentially a sort of man on the run film, the first Godard. The left bank were a little more intellectual, a little more taking their cues from a kind of political activism and also from the French New Novel, and it's people like Chris Marker, William Klein, who were also highlighting in the same exhibition with Chris Marker, Agnes Varda, Marguerite Duras. And that work is probably not as well known, not as successful, but equally important historically.
A little more of the outsider, a little more politically engaged.
If you could be the outsider to what is already an outsider movement, and that's exactly what it was.
That's great. Bruce, we've got to go, but if people wanted to call to find out more, there's a number for what, the box office?
Box office at the Walker, 375-7622. We're showing a retrospective of Chris Marker's work and William Klein. The Jetty will be shown, Sans Soleil, a couple of great William Klein films, Mr. Freedom, a political satire from the late 60s that was banned in France, which is hard to do, and his fashion film, which we showed a couple of years ago in our fashion season, Who Are You, Polly Magoo?
Yes, yes, excellent. Bruce Jenkins, thank you very much.
Phil.
Good overview.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Janet will be back in just a moment to wrap up the show, but I wanted to remind you, if you're interested in that poster we talked about, remember to call the City Cable 34 hotline, 673-2234. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Well, this was a look at another cultural district here in Minneapolis, the fourth that we've done this year. We started out way back in February looking at the West Bank Theater District. We then went up to Northeast Minneapolis and covered that whole quadrant of the city. And a few months ago, we took a look at all the stuff that's going on in the Warehouse District. So this is fun, nice little series we did this year.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on. Now, next month, we're going to have, among other guests, Dorit Sippis, who's a very interesting artist. She's going to come on and talk about her work. And there's a couple other things I wanted to mention here.
Yes.
There's a new service for those of you who are on the internet and all that. It is a web page available that lists it's about the most complete arts directory available online for Twin Cities folks. Steve Budis put this together. It is called the Twin Cities Performing Arts Directory, and you can reach it at www.bitstream.net/theater. That's THEATRE. So you can call that for some information. And a couple of other things. Some of our other guests who were on, Joni Herren, wanted to make sure that we knew that there's an exhibition called Guard Art. 25 guards from the Institute of Arts and the Walker Arts Center are going to be exhibited, their paintings and sculpture, at the Acadia Coffee Shop at Franklin and Nicollet. That opens October 11th for about a month run. That sounds like an interesting show. And then also Miriam Musk from Red Eye wanted to make sure that people knew about The Secret. That's the show that opens at Red Eye. It's by William Randall Beard and Steve Busa, and directed by Steve Busa, and it opens October 18th at Red Eye. Sounds like a fascinating show. She was describing it for me, based on the Czech writer Karel Čapek's script, The Macropolis Secret. So that sounds kind of neat. Yeah.
There's so much stuff going on. I wanted to be sure to mention the ICE Expo. The Interactive Content Expo, this is called. It is going to be at the Minneapolis Hyatt Regency on October 28th and 29th. And for all of you who are interested in this kind of thing, it will feature the latest innovations and techniques in interactive education, entertainment, healthcare, and commerce, with 5 keynote speakers, 16 quality breakout sessions, 5 offsite tours, feature entertainment, and a host of surprises. So if you are in the interactive scene at all, this is going to be this is the first time they've done this in the cities. It is a regional, national event, and we hope to do many, many more. So check it out.
Wow, great resource.
Yep.
Quickly, one last event that's coming up over at the Lutheran Brotherhood Building, downtown Minneapolis, an important exhibit. The entire month of October, it's called Awareness Alert Women and Breast Cancer. It features women artists from all over the United States. Sounds like a good thing.
It does.
Yeah.
So now we have our events calendar coming up. Be sure to get out your pens and pencils and pieces of paper and write some of those down.
And if you have any questions about people you've seen on the show, or if you want to get that poster into your life that we talked about, call the hotline at 673-2234. So until next time, I'm Phill Lindsay.
And I'm Janet Zahn. Thanks for watching Artifacts.